Hi everyone. Thanks for joining today. And yeah, really excited to share my learnings and experience around this topic. My name is Edgar Lopez, and I'm at Uber as a product ops lead. So we were talking today about how to transition from hardware industry to a software industry and how different it is to lead products in hardware and from leading products in software. And to begin with, I'll give you a quick introduction of my career and how this transition actually has been part of my experience. So you will see that I started in hardware companies such as Delphi, which is an automotive company, and HP, where I was in the printer division and I was leading the product development for printers. So really traditional in terms of like hardware development. And then I did the move towards software, and you will see a completely different paradigm on in type of company, right? You see Spotify and Uber, which is more about like how do we lead all these software products that users can actually experience. So two different worlds, and we'll see how to transition from one to another, and just to set the example of my career as one of many. So the first thing to highlight and list out what we're going to chat today. So we're going to go through some similarities and differences around these two industries. Then we're going to see some alternatives, some ways to transition across industries, and you will see there is not a single path. And then I'll give some tips, advices that I've learned along the way. And as any other advice, if it resonates with you, just take it. If it doesn't, just leave it there. So to begin with, I wanted to highlight and list out for you like the similarities between these two industries. And I've called it your strength, right? Like things that you are actually already doing in your role in hardware product development or hardware product management, that it could be highly transferable to a software environment. So the first one you will see is stakeholder management. So here you will have a cross-functional teams that are going to be really similar. So your interactions with those teams are going to remain exactly the same on how to approach those different functions. So you'll have your engineering team, your design team, your marketing team, your operations, or even horizontals like finance. So it will remain pretty similar, and you have to think that the objectives of those teams, either on hardware and software, are going to be similar as well. So just to set an example, the design team will always try to make that a smooth, excellent experience for the user. So the design actually is really good in the product itself. So this is going to happen regardless of the product, either it's hardware or software. So the way you align with those teams and the way you interact with them is going to remain really similar. The second one is about prioritization, right? So you will still use the same methodologies that you're using for prioritization in terms of like the framework, the resourcing, like to manage resourcing from like engineering or from other teams, and make sure that you come up with recommendations and business casing. These frameworks are going to be you could leverage them like a lot for your software management role. The third one that I wanted to list out here was around the customer focus. So what is essential here is like the way we interact with the way we need to understand the customer. So it might sound cliche, but it's as important as in one industry than the other. So we will have to understand the user needs. We have to talk to customers. We have to research about the customers and users. So this piece is actually gonna be really highly transferable. So all the experience that you've had in this space in the hardware industry will probably remain the same in the software space. And then lastly is about the project management, right? This is gonna be half of your time if you if you are in a product manager role. So you will have to still like build plans, reporting, monitoring, even when do we set the deadlines, the ownerships, and things like that are going to remain an essential skill for you to transfer to a new role in software management. So here are the four strengths that, and for me, these are the strengths that when you try to convey your narrative around why do you want to change, what are your key factors or key strengths, these are things that you want to emphasize because you're already doing, and you might be in a good position to find really good examples in your career and your experience in hardware that you can translate into the software environment really, really easily. So think about your career and what experiences can be bucketed in these four things, and how you can emphasize them when you are either in an interview or writing your CV. Then if we go to the other side of the coin, then we'll find the differences. And here's like what I've called hidden strength, because you will see that they're different from the outside, things that we think they are different from the history, but actually they're not that different after all, right? And we do it in the hardware industry in some way, but it's a little bit nuanced the way we do it. The first one that you see here on the screen is the time to market. So this one is about the pace of launching products. So you will find, like in hardware product, the normal timelines that we find ourselves is like months, years. So it's not about like days or weeks, right? Like, and then on the software side, we have really quick timelines to launch products to market. So this can be something that we might see really different, but they're like, we can actually see that the difference is not the time to market, but actually what remains the same is the pace of the workplace, right? So if you take an iteration of the product development in hardware, if you have a 1-year development cycle, maybe those small pieces of like 1-2 months that you have to iterate with your teams, they're really high pace, right? The timelines might be a little bit longer, but those stages are really high pace, as it could be a software development. So here I would try to make sure that you turn it into your favor, that difference, because at the end you have that speed, that pace into the day-to-day, that it should be really relevant and really transferable for a software environment. The second one I wanted to list here was around the data management. So big advantage of software products, you have real-time data, you can see the usage of the product real time, and you have so much information that you can leverage from a data perspective that it brings you into a position that is really advantageous compared to hardware, right? In hardware, you don't have that data that quickly. There's like always the interactions with the users, and all these things are really limited, and it's more challenging to get this amount of data around hardware products. However, I want to emphasize that the key thing is not about the data per se, but it's about managing data, right? And this is something we can find a lot of experiences in the hardware space, that you are managing data in a way that it could be highly transferable. For instance, I'll put an example in my experience, like quality reports. When we're doing manufacturing parts, there's like a lot of checks and imbalances on the quality side. So we have like these massive reports of data on the tolerances and things like that, and all the statistics, all the things are applicable, and these are the same things that you will use to come up with whatever recommendation in terms of data on the software space. So try to find those data management skills that you have on the hardware, that they don't have to be exactly the same type of data, but the way you manage data could be highly transferable as well. The third one that it's, for me, quite relevant is also the customer feedback. So the way we interact with the customer, given the data and everything we have from them, and even ratings, things like that, we get instant customer feedback right in the software products. Whereas in the hardware, it's actually really, it's more complicated to get this customer feedback, and it's not actually by default instant, right? So you have to actually create either focus groups, or you have to actually do a little more like a traditional research. So thinking about this instant customer feedback is another difference that I wanted to highlight. And as we've done with the previous two, one thing here to make sure we kind of flip it in our favor again is like, customer feedback happens anyway, right? So the relevant thing here is not that it's instant or the timing of the feedback, but how do we get this feedback? How do we scope the way we try to gather customer feedback? How do we leverage customer support? All these different pieces on how to get customer feedback is actually way more relevant than the fact that we cannot get instant feedback in the hardware products compared to software. So then the last one that I want to highlight as a difference from hardware to software is the reach, right? So something that is really obvious and it comes really top of mind of people is like, oh, when software we can reach billions of people, of users, whereas in hardware it's highly complex to reach that amount of users and in such a short period of time, right? In 1 week you can reach billions of users in software, but in hardware you have logistics, supply chain, all these different challenges that it's not that easy. So that's something for me that it needs to be put on a scale, things on scale, because at the end it could be as hard to reach 1 million users in hardware than reaching 1 billion in software, right? So whenever we try to put the numbers, even if it's an interview or in the CV, that we want to highlight the hardware sales or the users we reached with that hardware product, it's important to compare it with another hardware product that we could relate to, right? So we avoid the shortcut of trying to relate 1,000 users with 1 million of software, right? So it looks like a huge gap. But if we say, hey, 1,000 users was actually the best sales number that we could get in the category of that product, something like that will help to bridge that gap between reach. So we have to put things on a scale, so it's not that comparable within industries in this case. So just to summarize, you will see there are like many similarities you can leverage, and you need to make sure that you emphasize those whenever you are trying to put your case forward to move and transition towards a software industry. So stakeholder management, prioritization frameworks, customer focus, project management, all these things are things that you really want to put up front, and they are like your strength. On the other side, you have to do a little bit more digging, a little bit more finding on those differences, or what we've called the hidden strengths, because you need to make sure you exemplify them in a different way, right? Like the example that we said around data and the time to market. How do you emphasize the pace of the project instead of the length of the development? Things like that are things that you need to make sure that you work a little bit more on those differences to make sure that the interviewer or whoever you're talking to, they can get the perspective on what they need at the end of the day. So once we've gone through like some similarities and differences, we can deep dive on the how do we want to do this transition. But before we go in there, I just want to make sure we take a step back, and before the how, let's make sure we understand the why. I'm not gonna deep farther on the why, because it's something that every journey, every career is different, and I just want to emphasize the fact that it's important to understand why we want to do this transition before we go into actually how to do that. Some questions that help me to understand my willingness to do that is, what's your ultimate goal in your career? Where do you see the typical question of where do you see yourself in like 5-10 years from now? Do you have any role model in your company, right? Or outside of the company? And why is that person a role model to you? And is it going through software a way to reach that role or that position that you're aspiring to? And then some other questions that could be relevant for you to deep a little bit deeper on this why is like, what is the main reason you find software interesting? Is it the pace? Is it the teams, the stakeholder, product itself, the customers? What are those things? Can you get those things in your current industry, in another industry? So try to keep your mind open that software might not be the the solution. Transitioning to software might not be the solution if the why is not properly framed, right? The same thing on the flip side, like what is the main reason you don't find at this stage hardware interesting or exciting, right? Is it actually going to change if you move to software? And an example is like, is it the company or is it the team that you don't find comfortable at this point? Is it something you think is going to change if we move to software? Probably not. But it's more about like, how do you make sure you make yourself those questions that can help you to frame this why, because it's really important when you are trying to explain to someone this narrative, this why behind your move or your transition. It's highly relevant for the interviewer or for your network or colleagues when you want to actually make the move. So if we go to the how, and let's honor the name of the webinar, and I'm gonna touch into 4 types of transitions that I've either tried myself or I've seen my colleagues do. And then the first one is about moving within the company, right? And this is, I wanted to put this one at the beginning because it's one that people disregard straight away. There's this general feeling or thought that you need to change companies if you want to change from hardware to software. And you find really good companies that can actually have both, and you can transition within, right? The big blue chip companies, right? Like HP, Microsoft, all these companies are good examples, but we are not all working in those companies, right? But less intuitive ones such as retail. But what about if you are in operations in a retail company and you want to move to the e-commerce side of that retail company on helping on the website or things like that? These are still like highly powerful moves within the company, because you have to think that you're already there. You're halfway into the process, right? Your reputation, your network brings you halfway there. And normally internal recruiting is actually much easier than external and starting from scratch. So the first one, let's explore within the company. Let's try to make sure that those options within the company, if there is any, we actually talk to those people, and it could actually help you also to understand if that's the move you want to do by talking to people who are already in that space within your company. Second one is about going to like on the startup and route. And this is one model that I've seen a lot of people do, but it's actually a really good transition if you find the right company, you're passionate about the product, because at the end of the day, you will do everything. Even if you come with a role that it's not a product manager per se, but more a strategy, operations, even customer support, you will get to close so closely with all the relevant stakeholders in product, like software engineers and everyone, because it's gonna be like a handful of people, right? That's gonna driving the decisions there. So that's a really good option to do everything and learn on the job instead of like more traditional type of a structure move. So you can build your career within that startup, and you can find yourself as the startup grows, you can find yourself moving towards more like a product manager role within that company. So a second one to explore also, like, is a startup or a small company a good way for you to transition into software products? And it might not need to be a specific like traditional product manager role, because it could be something else, and you could actually get the similar feeling on that end. The third one I wanted to highlight here is what I've called intermediate academics, and this is more like the one that more traditional way and path. You could see examples like MBAs or even product school, things like that it helps you to guide you towards that transition of those companies, because there's a little bit of a structure behind, and it's more guided path. There's one point I want to highlight on this one, that we need to set the expectation right. The fact that you're paying for that, because normally they cost a lot of money, is it worth the investment? Does it guarantee you the transition? Can you get it through some other means? Because at the end of the day, you will have to work hard to recruit, make sure you learn the right skills and the right courses. It will obviously be facilitated and you will receive guidance, but you will also be competing with a number of students in the same cohort that are going to go for the same position. So it's not as straightforward as it looked like. It doesn't give you a ticket for the transition, right? If you pay, you really need to understand what is the right course. Is it worth the money? Because sometimes it's actually not the best way, depending on the career stage that you are or the company you want to switch on. But for sure, it's one that we need to consider, and it's one I want you to explore as well, and together with the two previous ones that we talked about. And finally, the one that I wanted to make sure that it's still on the cards, and I've actually tried myself, it didn't work for me. I've tried, like, let's do a side project, let's put some I was trying some online courses in Coursera, I tried to do my side project. It didn't bring me that far, but it helped me to understand that which are other ways to find the transition. But for instance, self-taught or do your own way, or try to do these side projects or online courses, like Coursera or things like that. It's actually another way to find the path towards a software management role. So you could actually exemplify, you can showcase that you're interested in the space, that you've done this type of product, or you've launched this thing, this little website with a friend, or whatever it is. It helps you to position yourself in a really good way for the interviewer or anything you're trying to achieve there. And back to the similarities, if you wrap it up together with all your transferable skills that we've talked about, look for the right examples, plus this DIY type of thing that you can exemplify and showcase that you are excited about this space and you want to transition there. It's actually a really good combination to put yourself into a recruiting process. So yeah, I wanted to put this one up because sometimes it feels like you always have to do it like the traditional and more structured way, but there are ways that you can take this by your own means, and it's an option as well. And sometimes it's the fact that there's not a structured PM role or transition or kind of a scope makes things a little bit more dynamic in terms of you trying to work for software products or lead software products in a way that it's not the industry standard, right? So for sure, like, consider this one as well. And it requires high level of discipline and passion. I have to mention is always we want to do this course and then halfway we finish. It happened to everyone, and me included. But yeah, I think it's another way that you should consider. So to wrap up, what's the best way how to transition, right? And I think the key point to take away from this webinar is that there are more than one path, and the fact that there are more, it actually opens up the space for you to explore them all. I don't think you have to pick and choose which is the best for you, but I think you actually need to be open-minded to try the 4 of them maybe at the same time, or the ones we said within the company. If you have the opportunity, talk to your network in the company, try to move around the company and see if that's an option. Startup as well, try to apply, talk to friends or colleagues that are working on a startup. How does it feel to work there? Is it the move that you're looking for in terms of leading software, or are you looking for more like a traditional PM type of role? Intermediate academics, more traditional way, but extremely valid one that it gives you like the guidance you need to get to that role. But let's make sure that you have the expectations right on and it's worth the money. And finally, self-taught, one that I really encourage you to explore, because it will help you also to understand the why a little bit more. Because when you get into the weeds and you try to do it yourself, then it helps you to make sure that you're passionate about that. So my advice here would be to make sure that you open the options and you don't pick or choose, I just gonna go for one. No, try to open the 4 of them, even if you come up with other types of transitions, because you will never know which one actually will lead you to the right place. And exploring them will help you to learn what you want, and more importantly, what you don't want to go after. So that would be my take on that. Try to explore them all. And then finally, to wrap up, some key takeaways of this webinar. The first one is like, there are many similarities between those two industries, and your hardware experience really, really counts. And I think sometimes it's underestimated because it's perceived as such a different industry, but there are so many transferable skills that you can leverage and you need to emphasize when you are going after this software management role. And then there's what we were saying before, there's not a single way to do the transition, and you really need to explore, keep digging on these alternatives that we listed today, and pretty much understand. It will help to understand the why before going into the how. So really, really key to dig a little bit further on the why we want to do that transition. And finally, it's never late. It's never late to transition, and you can do that when you're in early 20s, late 30s. It's never late to move from leading hardware to software. And the main thing also is bi-directional. So as soon as you are in software, there's nothing that can stop you to go back to hardware. So it's not a one-way door decision. You can always go back and out as you like, because the industries, at the end of the day, they're really similar, and the skills that the industry is looking for, both sides, are actually really similar. So with that, I just wanted to thank you all for joining this webinar. I hope you find that information useful for you to think about how to approach this transition between the two industries. And feel free to connect, feel free to drop me a message if you want to know more. And yeah, happy that I could have shared my experiences with you and my learnings on this journey. And I encourage you all to explore that as well. Thank you very much, and yeah, have a good day.